Pubella is shaping up to be a very polarizing place. Quiet, beautiful seaside neighborhoods right next door to noisy, bustling industrial ports. However, there's just one problem, or multiple, depending on how you look at it. Industrial areas in City Skylines 2 just aren't bustling enough for my liking. Ports in real life have thousands of employees. This one, 75. That's not nearly enough. To quote one of the greatest and influential creators of our generation, I'm not seeing enough movement. Let's fix that. Welcome back to Andros. Today's episode is going to have a big industrial focus as I try my hardest to create these areas with a bit of life and activity, as I do find when you build detailed or somewhat realistic looking industrial areas within City Skylines 2, they can fall a little bit flat. And that is particularly the case when you are detailing or trying to build ones that are a bit more realistic, and I'll talk a bit more about that in just a moment. But as part of what I'll be building today, I'm going to be building 2 shipyards. I remembered seeing Imperator do this build a couple months back, and when I got started building it, I went back and rewatched that video, and pretty much as soon as I clicked on it, I was met with this message.
I definitely can't recommend you to rebuild such a shipyard yourself, because it is simply very time consuming and very painful to build, so I can...
yeah, pretty bad timing to click on a video, and I'd already gotten started with the build, so can confirm, this is pretty tricky to make. He is totally right, and I didn't even make it anywhere near the level of detail that he goes into, but I gave it a crack, and I am pretty happy with the fact that it is acting as an industrial area and is also employing a fair amount of people within the city. So that is coming up within the build. But before we get there, I want to talk about the camera work for this time lapse, because I am doing something a little bit different. I have slowed down the camera speed and the movement speed of my controls, which I was hoping would make for slightly smoother transitions and camera speed when I sped it up in this time lapse. At least that's what I would do in City Skylines 1. I could slow down the simulation speed and it would make a really big difference when speeding up footage for time lapses. But I guess the camera does work a bit differently in City Skylines 2, and there is a sweet spot somewhere. It's probably between the current speed and normal speed, but I will continue to mess around with that and try and find that sweet spot to make these time lapses feel a little bit smoother. So far, what I've been up to is I've just placed down this post office, which is the second one that I've placed within Andros, and the very first one on the island of Pubella, which great name suggestion, by the way. I really enjoyed all the names that I got in the last episode, but I really liked Pubella because, first of all, it does in fact sound very fancy with the word Ella in it. I don't know, that it just immediately sounds very fancy. But then it's also got the word poo in it, so that also makes it pretty unfancy. It is, of course, a different spelling, and this is a French word apparently for trash can. So, I mean, this is about as good as it gets. I really like it. And because it is French, I reckon that we do need to add some more French architecture on this island and think about how else we can really lean into both sides of the fanciness and the unfanciness. So if you've got any ideas, please keep them coming, because we will continue to flesh out this city over the next couple of months. For this area, I've just been continuing to add some detail by just creating these vacant lots and placing down just a couple of growables here and there. But this is where the problem lies with building these custom and more detailed areas of industrial space, because we're essentially making a whole bunch of vacant lots, and of course, vacant lots in this game are just a bunch of props and surface. So there's not really going to be any activity around these areas. Now, if I was playing this game a little bit differently, if I just zoned out this entire block with a whole bunch of industry, then yeah, I would get quite a lot of bustle. I would get a whole bunch of trucks and activity down here. But if I wanted to make these areas feel and look a bit more like they do in real life, then I would expect to see a little bit more. And I think the biggest problem lies within the port, because you just do not see enough activity. What I'm doing here is I'm putting a bit of detail into the waterways, and I wanted there to be a bit of a drainage that went underneath this main road leading into the port, and I was having a bit of an experiment with some of the props that I could use. And at first I was trying to use this chimney, but it had a whole bunch of smoke coming out of the top of it. Luckily, there is another version of the same chimney, except this one is it works as a random one. So pretty much if I was to place it, it would just choose randomly which chimney comes out. Except for like two strange things about it. It is metallic looking, so I can't change the color of it. And the way that it attaches to objects, it's different. You know, I can't actually move it at all. I just attach it to something and then it just stays where it is. So I was able to make this work. It looks not exactly how I want it to look, but at least I get to use the same prop and it does look pretty cool. I spent a little bit of time just rejigging the road coming into this industrial port, but I am not totally happy with the way that it kind of snakes its way around here. I like the fact that it kind of hugs a bit more of the ramp leading up to the bridge. I like that, but the general path of it doesn't feel that realistic. So I'm going to revisit that at a later stage, but for now it's just the way it is. And then I felt like we needed another way for people to get onto the island. So I have placed down a passenger harbor, which I reckon that if we're talking about lackluster buildings, imagine the possibilities with a cruise ship. Like imagine if residents from the city drove to this harbor, jumped on a cruise ship, traveled for a week, returned, and then drove back. And each cruise ship held like 2,000 people. That would be so much fun, trying to deal with all the people making the journey out into the distance and then coming back. And then you could even specialize in tourism and imagine your city being flooded with tourists jumping off these boats and then leaving after a couple of weeks. That would be so interesting. At the moment, the ships are kind of a mix between a ferry and a cruise ship. They're not really either one of them. People move in from these ships and people leave the city as well with them. So it's kind of like, what? I don't really know what they are, but they are definitely a bit of a hybrid. I would love a bit of a lean into either a ferry or a cruise ship, and I think that would be really interesting. Regardless of the amount of people using the harbor, I am going to be putting in a fair amount of road infrastructure. We don't have a huge amount of room in terms of how many lanes and how many different services I can put out this way, but I did want to have at least a fairly sizable avenue coming in, and it does have a pretty good access to the highway that we built in the last episode. It pretty much leads directly to that interchange, which I think is going to be a pretty good system for trucks that are coming in and buses eventually. And that is pretty much it in terms of public transport. I don't really plan to build any sort of train line out here. I don't think we even have the space for it. And I also don't think we really need it. And I'm actually using Road Builder to create a custom avenue. I don't know why, I felt like I wanted the median in the middle to be a little bit bigger and I wanted to change the ground color for it too. So that's why I have decided to go for a custom one. I will also build a recycling center out this way too, and I don't really plan to build too much waste management facilities elsewhere besides Pubella. Like this is the main focus, apart from a couple of nice neighborhoods which will sprinkle here and there, but yeah, the main focus and the management of the waste within St. Andros is going to be from Pubella. I don't really think I'm going to be building too much more elsewhere, so I do want there to be enough infrastructure for all of that, as well as this shipyard which I have just started to build. I am now starting to follow the tutorial by Imperator, which is definitely really helpful. Especially figuring out how to get the water from not flooding this whole area, because, you know, obviously they open the doors and allow for the ships to come into this area, and then as they leave, they then close the doors and it then becomes a dry dock. So I did need to make sure that this whole area didn't have any water in it. So I am using two paths side by side, and that does do the trick, but it is a little bit thicker than I would like, but hey, that's fine. I do think the end result is good enough. I am also building another one to the side, as you can probably see, but that one is going to be abandoned and not operational, so I am going to be doing two different styles of shipyards. I am also taking inspiration from Boston, which, as you can see, is pretty similar to. We do have two fairly distinct shipyards, and I also love abandoned areas, so this is a pretty nice little mix for me. I also think that it's kind of cool seeing one that is operational, but then another one that is, you know, been left to ruin. And kind of just seeing the differences between the two, and maybe there's a story there. Maybe there's a reason why that one didn't work out and this one did. I don't know. I'll leave that one up to you guys. But in terms of putting this thing together, I am just going pretty overboard in terms of grime and mess and decals, and just using some of these surfaces just to make it look really worn and really dirty, because, you know, these areas are very industrial and, you know, you've got a lot of bits and pieces here and there. I think the cranes really add a lot, and I am changing the color just so we can get some differences in colors that are going on down here, because it does get very samey. So just trying to find something that stands out, and I think that the yellow does pretty well. And the crane should definitely be on some sort of tracks so that they can move to and from different sections of the ships, depending on whereabouts they're working. But I think that's just like implied detail. You can just imagine where that could be, because there is a level of detail that I wanted to put into this, and I will go back through during the live play and add a little bit more as well, which, you know what? We're actually getting pretty close to that live play, so I'm going to leave you with just the remainder of this build, and let's dive in and try and make all this a little bit more functional. So even just with those little additions of adding in the industry and just shaping that port, I feel like that's made a pretty big difference to the way that all this is starting to shape out, which is really lovely. Now, before I go in and show you a couple of bits and pieces, I actually want to address an issue that is kind of like the opposite of what I was talking about in the time-lapse and in the intro. Is I know I said I wanted a lot of movement down here, but we actually have a little bit too much movement in one department, and that's the shipping department. And it's not a huge deal, but it's just enough to take me out of the immersion of this being kind of like a real life place when you do have just a whole lot of these ships that are colliding with one another and just doing some really unrealistic looking things. I don't love it. And in particular, a lot of these ships they've got like no interaction with St. Andros anyway. They're literally just making their journey to a fictional city which has nothing to do with our city. So I am going to make some adjustments, and I reckon that should fix a lot of that. All I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this connection here, and it's going to mess up some of my lines, but what I'm going to do is by removing that little segment, that means that we're not going to get just random boats making a phantom journey from this end of the map all the way out this way. Instead, now it's just going to be ships that are actually interacting with St. Andros, and I think that's going to be a whole lot better. I'm just removing my shipping routes, and I'm going to re-drag these out and make some slight adjustments so that they do feel a little bit more realistic. And I'm going to change the frequency of all of these ships. I only really want one of them coming in on each line. And I can actually assign up to 6 vehicles for these networks, but I am just going to go down to 1 for all of them. And there pretty much is no point. I mean, this guy is leaving with no cargo. He dropped off no cargo. So let's just see what happens by just changing the amount of vehicles on these lines. That might change things a little bit. And to be honest, I'd prefer to see less vehicles transporting more goods. Does that make sense? I just think that's going to be far more realistic. And that's cleared up a lot of that unnecessary clutter that we had within our waterways, which I think is a major improvement for realism. And I'm also pretty happy to see that we do have these ships actually transporting goods rather than a lot of them coming in empty-handed. So in real life, ports are big industrial areas that employ thousands of people and contribute a lot in terms of industry and employment. For City Skylines 2, our port is currently employing 75 people. That should be a whole lot more. So that is just very unrealistic, and I don't love that. So here's what I'm going to do. We currently need 3 things. We need a little bit more industry, we need a whole lot more office, and I need a whole lot more movement down here. So I'm going to tackle all 3 of those things. I'm going to use Find It and Move It to splice some offices and some industry within our port, and that way I can bump up our industrial demand, see more movement, and then also increase the amount of employment within our port, which I think is going to be far more realistic. Now, I am curious to see how many how many jobs I can include within a pretty small space. At the moment, this is just 75. So what I'm going to do is I know I've just created this district, but I am going to create another one. I'll call it Port Castle Point because that's where it's located. And currently within this district, we have 94 employees. So that's already a little bit better than our 75. I guess that's including these little guys down here. So let's see what else we can splice in. And so we've gone from under 100 employees to under 1,000, which is far more realistic, which is great. And we're just seeing a whole lot more movement down here. I know it's not absolutely chockers, but I don't want to see huge amounts of traffic. You know, this is a port, so we are hopefully going to see more movement when we actually get cargo ships coming in and when freight's being transported to our port as well. And we're not really at full capacity here, but it is definitely an improvement. We were seeing no freight being delivered before, and now we're actually seeing a little bit, which is good. And it's more about the movement, which I think is a bit more in line with how it should truly look in real life. But I will continue to add and modify, but I actually reckon that we can make some improvements on the other side of the port. And we can add a few more jobs down here too. I'd imagine that a shipyard of this size would probably have close to, I don't know, maybe 500, 900 people working here. I don't know. I'm really just imagining. But it's not exactly a huge shipyard. And at the moment, the actual space that the shipyard is taken up is currently holding 0 employees. But I guess if we are including this office, which I do think is kind of part of it, only 35. So we do have a long ways to go. I think that we could potentially squeeze in a couple of growables within here. I do have one that is a good size and does get pretty well covered up, but it's those invisible paths that cause all the issues. If I was to drop him in there, no issues. But if I was to drop another one, let's turn off some snapping and we'll try again. We'll just go there. Okay, good. There. Not good. Here. Really not good. Here. Terrible. So I've got 2 buildings in there now and, oh, okay. So that actually holds quite a lot of employees. So that's quite a powerful little building. Okay. This might work. Wow, okay. No joke, I just squeezed in maybe like 30 of those buildings within this very, very tiny footprint. And I was able to use Better Bulldozer just to remove some of those pathways. And that was the trick that did in fact get all of them nice and hidden. Except for this one. I can't seem to move this guy into a spot that's going to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hopefully change the color. Let's just copy the building color of the main office. And then if I select him and paste, oh, that's just too good. I mean, it's not perfect, but come on. That is pretty damn close. And there is another guy in here, but, oh, I got him. Yeah, good enough. Good enough. All right, let's see if that makes much of a difference. I feel like that is going to put a bit more, into this area. I mean, I've really just added in so much employment within a very, very small space and kind of given a little bit more value to what is a shipyard. something that should be employing quite a lot of people. So I am really happy with that. Now, because we have added so many jobs and so much industry within all this little space down here, I'm going to go over to Smog Island, which has just been a bit of a dumping ground of all things industry, as you can probably tell. And I'm going to remove a bit of industry. Jeez Louise, that is a lot of red. And I don't know if you can tell, but all this is going to change dramatically over the course of this series. I mean, this is absolutely not how it's going to look. It will always be Smog Island. I think that we have to continue that legacy, but I mean, we can't keep this. This is truly terrible. So I've removed a bit of industry just to give a little bit more power to that industry that we zoned out. And while I'm at it, I am going to remove this landfill because there's only one place for landfill. My next addition for this port is going to be some recycling, and I am going to go for, originally I was just going to go for the generic recycling center, which I do think is a very nice looking building and would fit pretty well right there. I do also have the JP recycling center, which does come with the Japan pack, and I think that this is going to be a better size. Well, first of all, it's just got a little bit of a smaller footprint. I also like the fact that it does fit on this block, which I do want to continue. I like the fact that we have these rectangular blocks. It's just a bit of a theme for the road layout around here. So it is slightly a bit big, but I reckon if we use better bulldozer, we can make it work. And sorry, just a little bit distracted by all this movement. Look at all this. This is lovely. This is exactly what I wanted to see. Just a bit of action within our port. And I'm also noticing that our interchange is seeing a lot of work, a lot of people using it, and a lot of these big freight trucks, which is exactly what I want to see. I do need to make some additions and some changes to this road because I think it might be a touch too small, and I think I might need just to add maybe a few extra lanes just to give it a bit more oomph, you know, just a bit more power to that road. But let's not get distracted. Let's get some more vehicles on this road. I think out of everything that I just built just then, the thing that is making the biggest difference in terms of just feeling detailed and realistic and has just changed the overall mood for all this is probably the rock wall. Like the most basic of all things that I just built. Once again, I am using that little head as a rock wall because I feel like this is the best shape. You know, the stone head, which is a common theme throughout this series, and it's doing such a great job at just creating a little bit more detail for this area. Is this place more lively? I feel like a little bit. I mean, once again, I don't want it to be completely chockers, but I do want a bit of movement down here, and I still think that there is still a real lack of movement, you know? Like, as much as I am putting down here and zoning and the amount of buildings we have spliced into certain areas is kind of ridiculous. Even over here, this industrial building has 42 workers, which is quite a lot of people working there. But you know what? I don't really see anybody. There's like no one there. So it's not even the fact that, you know, there's no vehicles or trucks going into that building, but I don't even really see any people parked. But I've also added in some extra buildings just spliced into our recycling center, and, you know, once again, I'm not seeing a huge amount of movement. I am only really seeing a increase in people working here and maybe some slight extra traffic on the roads, but honestly, not a huge amount. It's pretty dead, except for some of these garbage trucks, which is nice to see. But apart from them, that's pretty much it. Because I've been placing down more buildings and splicing them into other ones, I have been reducing the amount of buildings over at Smog Island, and you know, that's what I'm going to continue doing throughout this series, is just, and kind of like how we used to use the old Rico mod from City Skylines 1, I am going to continue to splice buildings in just to make them feel and act a little bit more realistically. I am seeing more people using our passenger ship, which is lovely. I have also added in a taxi rank down here, well, at least a taxi depot. This is the very first one within St. Andros. And because he's right there, I am going to add in a taxi stand because I have seen a lot of people walking around here, and that's all fine. You know, I do appreciate people walking, but they must be walking for a pretty long distance because there's really not a huge amount out this way. So I think it's important to probably add in a taxi rank so then we can actually see some taxis using this route and picking up people. Now, I did also build another little shipyard, and of course this one is abandoned, and I've just placed down a whole bunch of logs that are all along here, and I'm sort of imagining that maybe this is used as storage for some sort of logging industry, so that's why all that is basically being used as that storage space. And you do find that a lot of these abandoned areas, there may be some sort of industry that ends up buying up that space or renting that space until it is occupied by something that's going to be built there. But I am just going to speed through a little bit because I reckon that I haven't let the game run for long enough, and perhaps there is actually a bit of a backlog of vehicles that do need to start using some of these areas. And even as I speed through things a little bit, I can actually see a bit more movement than I actually was before. So that's really nice to see. So I've just spent a little bit of time detailing up our interchange while I wait for more people to use our port, which I'm going to show you in just a moment. But as you can see, it's starting to look pretty nice down here. I have just filled in some gaps that I did leave a little bit incomplete. What are you doing, taxi? Don't do that. Actually, no, that's pretty in line with what taxis do in real life. But yeah, I've just kind of put in some bushes where I needed to fill some gaps. And then in other sections like this, I have just gone through with the surface tool and just added in just some imperfections, just some like bleeding, is that the right term? Dispersing of gravel. Yeah, that's probably more the term. Yeah, just into some other areas, and I feel like that's looking pretty good. But I think my absolute favorite thing that I've added are these billboards. So these are my own custom creation. I have used a little pillar down here just as its base. I was using some wooden pillars before, but this actually works a whole lot better. And yeah, there's some bits and pieces that don't truly work. You know, there's some things that look a bit odd, but for the most part, I'm really happy with this. This is exactly what I wanted in an area like this. And I will continue to add more and more in other little sections because I think they add so much. I am a big fan of billboards, and I'm a big fan of that. Okay, you know what else I'm a big fan of? Geez, I hope it's all there because last time I looked, this was pretty bustling, so let's just have a little gander and... yeah, man, that's pretty bustling. This is pretty much the perfect amount of truck traffic that I could possibly want. You don't want tons and tons and tons, you just want enough to feel like, whoa, that guy is freaking out. You just want enough to make it feel realistic, and apart from some cars doing some kind of weird things, this is pretty accurate. And obviously having some buildings spliced into it is definitely helping, you know, it's giving a bit more activity to all of that port, but I also think just by dispersing a lot more of the industry to this side of the port as well, and also just kind of removing some of the industry that sat over on Smog Island and just putting it into other places that are not just all in the one spot, I think has improved things quite a lot. So I am super happy with that, and just glad to see people actually using these roads because I find it super discouraging when you build these places and no one uses them. So this is great. Though what I will do is I am going to widen this road again. I know this road has received quite a lot of widening, but unfortunately, this is how the story goes. I think that's pretty much it in terms of, yeah, that's fine. That'll do. And I do wish I could do more with our shipyard. I wish I could see more vehicles coming here or maybe just see more activity, but I mean, apart from splicing in all those buildings into this one little office block, I don't really know what else I can do. So if you've got any ideas, let me know, but I kind of feel like we've done all we can. You know, there is a lot of people working here. It's providing a lot of jobs, and besides the fact that we don't really see much movement or anything happening, you know, these cranes aren't spinning around and these boats aren't reversing out and getting back into the ocean, there's not really a huge amount I can really do. So I'm all ears though. Let me know if you got any suggestions how we can make this just feel a little bit more happening, but I think that this is probably at its fullest potential. I do feel like everything is starting to feel a bit more active and vibrant and feels like more of a real city seeing areas like this and seeing people actually use it, which is really lovely. But in terms of creating polar opposites within Pubella, yeah, this is definitely on the yuckier, not as nice side of things. In terms of the other side of the coin, well, that's a story for the next episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode. It is always very much appreciated, and a big thank you all for getting in touch and giving me some ideas for some names and some stories. Please keep them coming because I would like to continue that narrative and think about some other ways of naming up and embedding some of your ideas into the series. So please keep them coming. Before I head off, I want to give a special shout out to some of my beloved patrons and YouTube members for making videos like this possible. Aussie69, Hugo Hellstrom, Narora Dorney, Charles Fabarini, Glenn Spillman, Jack Hawkins, Macau, Daniel Lawson, Matisse Hutzma, and Up the Rabbitohs. Cheers legends, catch you all on the next one.